Enlightened. Thank you so much for pitching up. Does anyone know the title of this session? So it's Stay in the Flow on the Go, and they've changed my subtitle, Mind Gym for Enlightened Awareness on the Move. And I actually had to think about that myself. But it's going to be in the territory of what do I need to be thinking when I'm doing things so that it actually strengthens my state of mind? Yeah? That's kind of the territory that we're in. And when I was asked to do one of the little mindsets, and I know most of us speak normally for quite a lot longer, and 20 minutes is quite short. I have to be quite focused. So I had to do quite a bit of thinking about this. But they ask you to speak about something that you are deeply interested in and deeply passionate about. And I thought, how wonderful. I can now have my chance to talk about the connection between activity, which for me is sport, because I was a great sportsman when I was younger, and I love sport, and what seems to be a kind of almost like a paradox of being quiet and silent when you're doing things. Yeah? And I'm originally from Liverpool. Went to school round the corner from Penny Lane, where the Beatles were, of Beatles fame, yes. And so I'm kind of old enough to remember, the idea about meditation, all sitting there. I didn't do that. But the idea, and it's kind of perpetuated even in some of our books of meditation. You're sitting there, cross-legged, eyes closed, kind of, yeah. Now that's okay. I worked as a children's dentist for many years. Now, just hands up, just a straw poll. Anyone here like to be treated by a dentist who's got his eyes closed? Any taxi drivers here? No. Anyone like to share a car with a driver who's driving with his eyes closed? Yeah? Anyone got a family? Yes. Work. Now, the problem with this kind of archetypal image of kind of meditation, cross-legged, eyes closed, is that it's nice as long as you don't have a life to live. And if you've got a life to live, then somehow we've got to integrate this kind of quietness into activity. And for me, that's, I guess, the territory we want to try and explore in these few minutes. I guess, have any of you heard of or know about, have had the experience of sort of being in the flow, being in the zone? I mean, I hope I'm not going to bore the people who aren't sporty. But it's a term that comes across all walks of life, but they've particularly examined it in sport. But actually, generally, it's with people that are creative. And I actually believe that sports people are very, very creative. And what I noticed about looking at this whole area is that it seems to have an amazing parallel with spirituality and meditation. In fact, I'm sure all of you have had that experience where you're not really thinking and everything's just flowing, and up north we say the ducks line up. So you kind of, if you go on the bus, you come out, the difference between coming out of the gate, coming around onto the path, arriving at the bus stop when the bus has just left, and the difference may be only 10 or 20 seconds where you come out the gate and you just arrive just as the bus comes around the corner and stops and you get on. Yeah, you've had that kind of experience. When I guess it's probably synchronicity, and it's very much to do with alignment as well. Somehow you feel kind of aligned with everything and kind of connected. And I guess probably if we were doing a sound bite, those are probably the three words that for me were coming to mind when we're talking about being in the flow. It's like flow, and it's kind of a sense of alignment, and it's kind of being connected, and then everything just flows. And I mean, if you actually, and you can Google this yourself, but when people describe being in the flow, particularly sports people or creative people, they talk about an intense sense of concentration. They're completely absorbed. They have a sense of control, being in control. But that's different from trying to control things. Yeah? Alertness is there. Peace, calm, They feel very, very relaxed, like me at the moment. An altered sense of time. You know when you do something, it's almost like, I can feel a few nods. You know when everything just kind of slows down and stops, and it feels like it's almost like a timeless state, and also within that absorption, they lose kind of concerns about external things and things that you would normally worry about. And one of the big things is that, well, two big things, is that they're very intuitive. You just kind of know, like, no one's tell you, but you go, maybe in life you've always turned right 999 times. And this time you just know you have to turn left, yeah? You've had that kind of experience. It's not logical, in fact, it's sort of counterintuitive, but it actually turns out to be right. Like when I was parking my car, where I parked it exactly where it was last year, in the right place, and I just had a feeling maybe I should move it a little bit further along. And of course, yesterday I was summoned, David, we've just changed the system this year. You couldn't, and I said, move my car a little bit further along. And it was quite interesting because that thought was coming in my mind. It's completely illogical, but there was something there. So that's the kind of feeling that people have when they're in the zone. And particularly in a sports context, in America, the pitcher will turn around and throw it that way, and the guy goes that way, and he goes and catches it. And afterwards, they'll ask him, but how did you know where to throw it? And then they asked the guy who caught the ball, how did you know where the ball was going? Because they couldn't see each other. And he said, I just know. I just knew. So that's the kind of territory where we're in. Now, when you look at the process of meditation and spirituality, for me, it actually feels very, very similar. Because one of the, like in sport particularly, and those of you who follow the golf and the cricket, some of you, anyone know it's the British Open this weekend? England are playing India? Quite interesting. When I came across, what they were talking about is the lack of form of the captain, and they were actually talking about this territory, that it's all about mental strength, confidence, lack of, where you lose faith in yourself, and actually how long it takes to build yourself up. And Alistair Cook, our cricket captain, has scored 25 centuries for England, so he's got a pedigree of scoring runs, but the last little while he hasn't. And the psychologist was saying, actually, it takes a long time to build your confidence up, but it's very easy to lose it. In cricket or in golf, it could be one round, or it could even be a couple of shots. And I was thinking, gosh, that's just the same as us, isn't it? You're okay at doing something, and then something doesn't go quite right, and your confidence goes down very, very quickly. So there's a real kind of parallel there. And one of the things, or a couple of things that really take you out of this kind of zone state is very connected to what I used to do with children. Used to cause quite a bit of, not intentionally, it's got a fear and anxiety, being a dentist. And when you get older, it's usually the fear of the wallet rather than the fear of the pain. Now, I worked in the community service, so I wasn't charging people, I might say. But what takes people out of this flow, out of this kind of zone, is when fear comes in, when anxiety comes in, when this kind of self-doubt comes in. And so I actually find that quite interesting. In terms of sport, people perform better when they're relaxed. And again, there's these kind of almost opposing things where I've got to be really alert and really focused and really on the ball, which is kind of how I had to be when I was working, and at the same time not so focused that I lose my naturalness, particularly when I was working with children. So it seems to be a very common territory. I would just like to give you the example of a river, because a river flows, doesn't it? And the river starts off in the mountain, fresh, pure, clean, vibrant, full of energy, and then it winds its way down to the sea. And when it gets down to the sea, it's slowed down because it's picked up a lot of silt and debris. And where I come from, Liverpool, a few tin cans and shopping trolleys and stuff like that. Not always. However, it's the silt which actually slows the flow of the river down. And I guess it's probably because of resistance as well. There's more resistance. But, you know, a question, when you're looking at a river that looks kind of slow and looks kind of dirty and full of rubbish, is that rubbish in the river or is it of the river? I know I'm not supposed to ask questions in these 20-minute talks, but I'm going to. It's in the river, isn't it? It's not of the river, but so basically, probably the term we'd use it's been picked up on the way, it's been acquired. So the rubbish, the silt that is actually slowing the river down isn't innate. It's not there at the start of the river's journey. It's just been picked up. And for me, that's a kind of an analogy for how we are. You know, we start off fresh, pure, clean, powerful, strong, happy. And if I was to kind of ask you, I haven't got a flip chart here, but if I was to say, you know, down here, peace, love, wisdom, power, strength, and over here, the opposites of those, sort of anxiety, hatred, cruelty, weakness, etc., where would you prefer to be? Yeah, you want to be over here. And why do we want to be over here? Essentially because it makes us feel good. And we would say, in a meditation sense, because that's what we are. That's who we are on the inside. And I find it interesting when you look at this experience of flow, the brain waves when people are actually in high flow, because we're talking about peak performance, we're talking about someone who's going hell for leather in action, and yet their mind is quiet. This is what their mind is silent. And the brain waves are alpha waves, which are very, very similar to what a lot of people go into when they're meditating. And those kind of brain waves, those alpha waves, are actually connected to qualities like peace and strength and wisdom and compassion. And so there's a kind of a huge crossover. And I would suggest that that's because at the core of the human being, that's what we are, essentially. And somehow, in the same with we can use our thoughts to go into this in a meditative state, somehow I would say people are actually using activity and they're coming to the same point. It's kind of interesting. Well, I find it interesting. And actually one of the other things that comes up when the psychologists look at the state of mind is that they talk about where action and awareness kind of meet. And that's kind of interesting. Now, in terms of the second part of the subtitle, Mind Gym for Enlightened Awareness on the Move, yesterday after the talk, someone was talking about mindfulness. You know, where you're very mindful and like you can sit under the tree here, and you can hear the noises, you can hear the birds, and you can appreciate the sun. And that brings us into this kind of quiet state. But so it's an awareness in a sense, but the conversation we were having is that it doesn't tell me who it is that is being aware. Yeah? Sounds a bit Monty Python-esque, doesn't it? You know, who is it? Who's being aware of being aware? But actually, there's something further back than the mind. There's something which is actually creating thoughts, that is actually carrying the awareness, and actually, certainly in a meditative state, can actually observe what's going on in the mind. And again, interesting enough for me, when people in a sporting experience, they often describe that they were just doing everything, and there was the part of them kind of standing back, almost like watching themselves. Good actors describe that as well. They describe themselves acting, and yet kind of stepping back and acting. Now, that's kind of interesting. So there's something further back, and I would say for myself, this is where enlightened awareness comes, and I become aware of who I am on the inside and what my qualities are, and that, in a sense, that's essentially what meditation is. And then I use that to flow those into my actions. And if I've got self-awareness, and there's so many things going on here over the weekend, and you can really get a depth of that there's something spiritual inside that's kind of coming out through the physical. And if I'm aware of that as I'm doing things, and I've done my preparation, then I can allow myself just to trust myself and allow those qualities to flow into what I'm doing. And then that's a very beautiful experience. The other thing that's very connected to this is presence. You're actually present for yourself, and therefore you're present for other people. And that feels very nice when you're talking to people. It feels very nice if you're being treated by someone who's actually present for you, rather than your mind being somewhere else. It feels very healing. And it's interesting that meditation actually, the word meditation means to think and to heal. So it's about creating thoughts that actually bring us together, a bit like Humpty Dumpty, broken into many pieces, but we bring all the different parts together. And in order to do that, I would say that just like the sportsmen have to do their drills and they repeat things again and again, and then when they play, when they get in the zone, they're not thinking about how to hit the ball. They're not thinking about the mechanics of things. They're actually just trusting and allowing the intuitive self to flow through, and they've kind of learned the strokes. And in a sense, meditation's a bit like that, but we're doing that with the mind. And we're recognizing that deep inside myself, inside the soul, there is a core of goodness, and that's what I am. And I'm actively using my thoughts again and again to think about that, and think about the beautiful qualities inside the self. And you can go and have your virtue scope read over there, and you'll get a whole list of all these beautiful qualities. And when you actually start to realize that's what I am, and you start to think about it, and you start to feel it, because what you think you feel, then actually that starts to flow. And your inner wisdom says, yes, I like this. I like to be peaceful. I like to feel connected. And then you can actually flow that into your activities. And then your activities, instead of taking you out of your good state of mind, because you get lost in everything, you kind of get lost in a sense of positive absorption, but there's something behind, which is self-awareness. And in essence, and we can talk about this under the tree afterwards if you're interested. To me, that's the difference between just awareness and enlightened awareness. And, in terms of the idea of mind gym, it's very interesting. You do physical exercise, it tunes up your muscles. It also tunes your brain up. Physical exercise actually makes your brain younger. And now we know, with this new brain science, that the brain actually changes. There's a very interesting book, I think it's called The Brain That Changes Itself. So if you think in a certain way over a pattern, the neurons come together and they hardwire your brain. So if you have negative thoughts, it actually creates a kind of a negative thought center in your brain, and it's a physical thing. And that means that it's more likely that you're going to think like that and act like that in the future. And of course, when you're looking at negative addictions, you can see why sometimes people say, I want to stop doing this, but I can't. Because it's actually not just wired into the kind of the mind, but it's actually gone into the hardware of the brain. And the beautiful thing about this is the opposite of that is also true. That if I start thinking in a different way, like here, and I start thinking like, oh my God, I've got to do a 20-minute mindset, and what happens if I can't remember what I'm going to say? And then the mind says, it's okay, you've done your work, just be yourself, and whatever comes out, I'm sure it'll be useful for someone, and it's okay. So you change your mindset, you frame things again and again, and that's actually setting up a new pattern in the brain, which is, I find is really quite exciting, and certainly in the field of mental health, it gives a powerful hope, doesn't it? Because actually if I change my thoughts over a period of time, I'm literally changing my brain, which is interesting, isn't it? Right, I think I need to stop. My cameraman is just about to run out of film. He told me he has 20 minutes left. So thank you so much for listening.